Kansas has already written a check that they have to cash on Saturday in this game and that they will continue to be cashing for a while and have been cashing for years. And that is that for a long time, Kansas, I wouldn't say totally ignored in-state recruiting, but they didn't do a whole heck of a lot of it. And what they didn't do that they really should do that K-State has just run circles around them with over the years is take players outside of the top 3 or 4 in the state of Kansas that do have a chip on their shoulder and players that will take time to develop in the program, but that will be very good 3 to 4 year players for you. Those are the guys that K-State has had in spades that Kansas always has this attitude of, we're too good for that. We don't need that. We're going to shoot higher. We will aim higher. Now, there's a delicate balance to strike with all of that because I think K-State right now, in general, as a staff, they're aiming higher recruiting-wise, but they're still taking the Damian Ilalios of the world. They're still taking the Cody Stuffle may not be as good of an example, the Hadley Panzers of the world, to name just a couple of kids from the last few recruiting classes, the Jax Denines of the world, who Kansas said, nope. Legacy, don't want you. And it cost them both Keenan Garber and Jax Denine. That's the attitude Kansas has had for a long time. And it creates a lot of in-state kids saying things like this that we heard today from K-State's players that do have a chip on their shoulder every time they go out on the field against Kansas, even if Kansas is a pretty lifeless opponent.
I think about it a lot now, but I mean, it's not a grudge, but, you kind of think about it because, I live 15 minutes away from Lawrence, and it was kind of like they didn't even give me a look. And so it's kind of, it kind of hits home a little bit.
It's kind of just a respect thing, how Kansas State came out and offered me first and had that trust and belief in me. And, kind of KU, really not having that was kind of a disappointment a little bit. Yes, it does fire me up a little bit because they're only 30 minutes down the road and the interest was very little.
Being so close to Lawrence, I always felt that that there was a little bit of motivation in not being recruited at all by them. I went to one camp, talked to their coaches there, and that was it. So there's definitely motivation in that. Feeling like I might have been overlooked.
So there you heard Jerron McPherson, Wyatt Hubert, and Briley Moore. Perfect candidates for this type of a player. Now, I get it. If you go back and look at it, Wyatt Hubert was a fairly high 3-star recruit and picked K-State pretty early and just zeroed in on that. But the other two, like Briley Moore and Jerron McPherson, those are guys, one had to go the JUCO route, one had to go the FCS route because they didn't get legitimate FBS interest from the Power 5 schools around them that include Kansas. And the important factor here to remember, because I've seen some on social media like, oh, why do these guys care? Kansas is not even a good program. Why are they upset about not being recruited by them? Well, because in their position at the time, like Jerron McPherson had to go JUCO. He would have loved a Kansas offer at the time. It doesn't matter how bad that program is. He was playing in Bays or Linwood. Not far away at all. He would have loved that offer at that time, and he didn't get it. And Briley Moore would have loved that offer at that time, but he didn't get it. Wyatt Hubert, if you wanted to come to me and say, that seems a bit manufactured, like, oh, okay. But I think these guys still do like to, we talk about all the time how these kids love to soak up the attention from everybody. They want the attention from the local schools, and they are going to take it as a slight if you do not give them the requisite amount of attention. And that's what's at play here. And that's why, K-State has 2 11-game winning streaks in this series since Bill Snyder came to K-State. One of them they're in the midst of right now. How does this happen that K-State can be so dominant, even if the programs have been miles apart? How is K-State so dominant and there's not any kind of a slip-up in there? Well, I think a large part of it is because Kansas simply, especially under Beatty and Weiss, did not care enough about in-state recruiting, and so it leaves all these kids that get upset and angry and find their way to K-State eventually one way or the other, ready to take it out on Kansas at any possible moment. Because Kansas acts with this arrogance like they are too good for kids from the state of Kansas to take these kids with a chip on their shoulder, it leaves them with chips on their shoulder. And so even when they go into a game, and they look at the records and say, well, Kansas is 0-4. We're sitting here 3-1. We're first place in the Big 12. This would be an easy game to overlook, except, oh, yeah, I remember that dude. I remember these guys. I didn't think I was good enough for them. So now there is that extra edge. They do come out and play with more of a chip on their shoulder. And it gives K-State a big-time advantage. Like, if Kansas were just merely bad, but they were bad while still trying to do some of this in-state, and they had more kids like that, one, it would help their roster because they would have more kids in-state that theoretically would have similar thoughts to K-State. But two, it would also just remove some of those from K-State's roster. Instead, they've let K-State just hoard these kids for years and build up all this resentment and pent-up energy just ready to go take it out on Kansas whenever they get the opportunity to. I think that is something that Kansas has just done a horrendous job with for years, and that's laid the groundwork for a bunch of bleep kickings. It really has. It's made it a lot worse than it potentially would have been for Kansas.
I can't disagree with anything you just said, and I won't try to top it either. I just will add to something, or add to what you just said with a little something here. That's what Coach Kleiman said during the press conference earlier today was about Deuce Vaughn and his whole story. And I think K-State for a long time has done a really good job, and I think this is a big difference in the recruiting of these two programs, is K-State taking a chance at overlooked talent and developing that overlooked talent into a really good football player at the Division I level. Wyatt Hubert is one of those guys. He had the K-State offer. He didn't really have much after that. But Deuce Vaughn is another one of those situations where we always talk about he's from the Austin, Texas area. He didn't get an offer from Texas. He didn't have an offer from the state of Texas, from a Division I school. Not a single one. He was overlooked by the entire state. But K-State took a chance on him, and Coach Kleiman said it took him 4 plays, looking at him on tape to know, all right, this kid has got something. Everybody's over, and he needs to come to K-State. K-State's been so much better at taking chances on guys like that, and it's worked out.
They have, and when Mark Mangino was at Kansas, he was understanding enough of needing those types of players, and he would get some of those types of players. And I've actually thought some about this today because I came up with the viral sensation that is the Lou Perkins Challenge. It's the Lou Perkins Challenge because Lou Perkins is the guy that fired Mark Mangino.
I got to be honest, I've never heard of that. Well, I know who he is.
Okay.
The challenge. Is this something you made up?
Mitch, it's something we've already talked about here on the show. It's why you tweeted a picture at me earlier today.
But I never heard of it prior to today.
Because I made it up today.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Did you make this up?
Yes.
Like you didn't get it from somebody else?
No.
Like another K-State fan?
No, and I called it the Lou Perkins Challenge because he's the guy that fired Mangino, and so Kansas has not beaten K-State since then. But Mangino God, that guy was scary when he was at Kansas. I mean, it scared the hell out of me as a K-State fan because he understood a lot of these things. You know, being with Bill Snyder and being at K-State and seeing how it worked to have a successful program in the state, he understood it. And it was, dudes like Jake Sharp were just running all over K-State. White running back from Salina Central, just plowing K-State.
Still my least favorite Jayhawk of all time.
Into the ground. Kerry Meyer, whose brother played at K-State, was out there as one of their best receivers. Like, that was something that Mark Mangino got. And it seems like no coach since he left at Kansas has had any sort of a clue in that regard. And it has really hurt them, and it continues to hurt them exponentially year after year. And I think that's why you get guys still to this day in 2020 coming out and saying things like we heard from 3 and then 4. I mean, Harry Trotter we can tack on there too. He just didn't have as engaging of a quote. But all 4 players that we talked to today had the exact same thing to say, that they were overlooked by Kansas and they're motivated by that. So that's why I will be cocky and confident John this week. I don't think there's going to be any lack of motivation for K-State, even if they give Kansas a little bulletin board material. Who cares? Who cares? Guys, it's going to be okay. Don't act scared this week.